发现反坦克兵。
What's going on YouTube? I am dukedobbins, FTW, and over the years there's always been a lot of talk about the elusive COD killer. An FPS game strong enough to knock Call of Duty off its perch as the top-selling console title. Back in the day, the COD killer was supposed to be Halo Reach, then Crysis 3, then Titanfall, and a whole host of other FPS titles. And of course, from time to time, a new Battlefield game. Now, over the last few weeks, there's been a lot of talk that Battlefield 1 might finally be the mythical COD killer we've all been waiting for. People point towards the popularity of the new Battlefield trailer and contrast it with the exceptionally poor reception that the Infinite Warfare trailer has received. Clearly, Battlefield 1 has the momentum, and COD has suffered a major blow. But the truth is, even if the Infinite Warfare trailer hadn't been brutally ass-fisted the way it was, Battlefield 1 would still be in a strong position to dethrone COD this time around, because Battlefield is the better game. The simple truth is, Battlefield 4 would have beaten Call of Duty Ghosts back in 2013 if it had launched under slightly different circumstances. BF4 got screwed because it released before the new gen consoles came out, so its debut took place in 30 frames per second and capped at 16v16. It's hardly even worth releasing on the console's outdated tech at the time if you ask me, and of course, you had the catastrophic fuck-up that let COD get away with Ghosts, which was that terrible launch that kneecapped the game pretty thoroughly. Now this time around, Battlefield 1 will debut in 60 frames per second and supporting 32v32, and assuming DICE has learned from their mistakes, and they say they have, the game should work at launch. But there's still plenty of opportunity for them to fuck it up, and today I want to talk about the steps that's important we take to improve the quality of our community feedback to make sure that Battlefield 1 isn't another Star Wars Battlefront. Now, is the quality of community feedback the biggest problem in gaming today? Not at all. But its improvement is something that I think could go a long ways towards improving every game. And improving the quality of community feedback has always been one of my primary goals with this channel. And so something you'll see me do a lot on this channel, as a games critic, is discuss in as much detail as I possibly can what games got wrong and what they got right, what they should do in the future and what they shouldn't have done in the past. And Star Wars Battlefront is the perfect example of why it's so important that gaming communities have these discussions more often and in more depth. Game developers do strive to give their fans and player base exactly what they want for obvious reasons. That's the most sensible thing to do if you're trying to make money off this shit. You want as many people as possible to enjoy the product. And in theory, the simplest way to ensure your fans enjoy the product is to first figure out what they enjoy, and just as importantly, what they don't enjoy, and then mold the product to reflect those preferences. And every company for the last half-century has poured copious amounts of resources into trying to decipher what's going to make their customers happiest, how to make their product as appealing as possible, right? A simple example would be like traditional milk cartons, which as many of you might recall, used to require this odd little cardboard triangular slit you had to like fold open. But people didn't like that shit, myself included, because a lot of the time you'd accidentally tear it and then the whole carton is fucked. So nowadays, most milk containers rely exclusively on those little twist-off caps. In fact, I bet a lot of you didn't even notice they phased out that little cardboard vagina slit, huh? Or cookies at the store, right? Oreos and Chips Ahoy and what have you. It used to be you had to open the plastic bag and then pull the little sheet of cookies out, right? The little plastic container thing. But this made it kind of inconvenient to eat the shit when you're trying to get the cookies at the back of the box, because you have to pull them all the way out and then you have to fit it perfectly back into this little plastic bag. It was inconvenient and obnoxious, so now they just do that resealable top, right? You know what the fuck I'm talking about. There's gonna be a whole generation that doesn't appreciate the bullshit 90s kids had to go through opening fucking milk and cookies. But here's the thing, all those things I just mentioned, they're easy to understand problems with simple solutions. The problem with gaming is that it's much more complex and nuanced. Adding this feature or removing that feature will frequently result in unintended consequences because of how interconnected a game's mechanics are. And it is oftentimes very difficult for developers to ascertain exactly what it is we don't like and what it is we want, because a lot of the time we have trouble articulating it ourselves. And this breakdown in communication results in shitty games. Case in point, Star Wars Battlefront. Before this game came out, everyone and their dog was throwing a hissy fit about the possibility that this game might be like Battlefield. For whatever reason, everyone detested the idea of a Battlefield reskin. And you know it was showing up in the focus groups, and you know it was something DICE was concerned would negatively affect sales because they had to come out and make an official announcement saying, no, don't worry, we promise this game won't be like Battlefield, everybody just chill the fuck out. A DICE executive even had to come on Reddit and go on a bit of a rant, really, and saying, and I quote, "From what we've shown you, in what way does it look like Battlefield? Are you seeing tanks? Or lots of destruction? No, I'm not, and that's the fucking problem." Fact of the matter is, if Battlefront had had more tanks and more destruction, if it had felt more like Battlefield, way more fucking people would like that game, and its playlist populations wouldn't have bottomed out within 6 months. The game wouldn't have flopped as epically as it did. On that last video, I said it flopped. People are like, oh, 12 million sales is a flop? I hate it when fucking people say dumbass shit so smugly. Only reason that game sold 12 million copies is because it has Star Wars in the title. That game was garbage. That game was the prettiest, best sounding, fat, steamy pile of shit that I have ever played. And they designed it specifically so that it wouldn't feel like Battlefield, because that's what everyone said they didn't want. And the result was a terrible video game. And just so we're clear, a Star Wars Battlefield reskin would be a reskin in the same way that Battlefield 1 is going to be a World War I Battlefield reskin. It's a completely different setting with new game mechanics and new kinds of equipment, weapons, and vehicles. A Star Wars Battlefield would have been epic, okay? And I think it's important we recognize that the online gaming community is culpable in the fuck-up that is Star Wars Battlefront. It's partly our fault. Should DICE have showed more intellectual courage and catered less to the whims of people talking shit online? Yes, but at the end of the day, they do have to try and give us what we want. That's what the fuck they're gonna do, and we got exactly what we asked for, or at least what most of us were asking for. You know, there's only so much they can change in a large-scale warfare setting. And to separate it from Battlefield, they basically had to opt out of all the cool shit that's in Battlefield. And so the question is, did all these people understand what exactly they were asking for? They were never very specific, they just said don't make it like Battlefield. If you had gone through and asked them, you know, do you want to remove destruction? Is it the squad system you don't like? Do you not like vehicles? Would they have said, yeah, get rid of all that shit? I doubt it, but here we are, they got rid of all that shit. Really, I think it was just a bunch of whiny babies who sucked ass at Battlefield and didn't want to get whooped on in Battlefront. And the only specific reasoning I've heard behind this irrational fear of a Battlefield reskin was that they wanted to stay true to the originals, but the originals were Battlefield reskins themselves. Same vehicle system, same game modes. Battlefront was always a Battlefield reskin, and the last time I brought this up, people said, well, we wanted Battlefront to stay true to the old Battlefields, which are what the old Battlefront games were reskinned off of, not the new Battlefield games. But again, the only difference between old Battlefields and new Battlefields is destruction, class customization, and better graphics. Do you not fucking like those things? We got exactly what we asked for, and basically everyone thought it sucked. The problem is people did not fully comprehend the implications of what they were asking for, and there was never any specificity about what they meant when they said don't do it like Battlefield. Now, the last 2 minutes of this commentary is a brief summary of the discussion the online gaming community should have been having before this game came out. We should have talked about what a Battlefield reskin would look like, and what a game with large-scale warfare would look like if it didn't do it the way Battlefield did. We should have talked about which features we did and did not want carried over to Battlefront. We should have talked about the classic Battlefronts and compared them with classic and modern Battlefields. But we didn't. We failed. The online gaming community has a bad habit of passionately demanding that developers take a game in a very general and unspecific direction. Don't make it a Battlefield reskin. Or like with COD, make it different. We have to do a better job of more clearly and accurately defining what it is we want and what it is we don't want. And what I would recommend, the philosophy that I think more online gaming communities need to adopt, is that anytime you criticize something, you have to offer a counter alternative. You have to offer some way they do it differently. You have to explain how you would do it differently. You have to offer a solution. When you put yourself into the mind of the developers, then you start running into some of the same problems and some of the same contradictions. And when you do that, it might be able to give you a better opinion, or at least a more realistic idea of what it is you want and what it is you don't want. And that's why game forums and YouTube channels are so important, because this is where we have those discussions. These are the places where all of the game's fans can come together and really break down with extreme specificity what it is we want and what it is we don't want. And just as importantly, we can examine the potential consequences of the addition or removal of certain features, because a lot of the time, people will really want something without realizing the effect it has on other aspects of the game. And when some of those unintended consequences are explained to them, they often might decide they actually don't want that feature at all. That's something I've seen a lot with Sprint in Halo. I know lots and lots of people who all say Sprint belongs in Halo. We have to have Sprint. But when I take the time to explain to them how the game's maps and guns have to be drastically changed in order to accommodate the ability to dramatically increase player speed at random arbitrary intervals, when I explain that fan-favorite maps from the past like Lockout, Warlord, Shrine can no longer be included in the game because they are not compatible with Sprint, when I explain that shit to them, a lot of people, not all of them, but a lot of people change their mind about Sprint. And it's too bad we didn't have that discussion before Halo 4. Now, obviously, it's too late for Battlefront. The game blows and playlist populations won't survive the fall. But the future of Battlefield 1 hangs in the balance. And a lot of people say that Battlefield 1 is already basically finished, and that there's a little that the online Battlefield community can do to influence it. But the fact of the matter is, a lot can change even in the next 6 months, and more importantly, what I know for a fact is that this game will change significantly after it's released. Games today are living things. The Battlefield will continue to evolve and change with each new update, and what that change looks like will have a lot to do with community feedback. And community feedback will be shaped in the YouTube comment section, on Reddit, in the game's official forums. That's where the public opinion is shaped, and the game will reflect that public opinion. You look at Battlefield 4 or a game like Destiny, these are games that changed a shitload after they had released. The meta they ended with was very different from what they had when they first launched, because it's not just big stuff that defines a game, it's the little things too. Times to kill, vehicle respawn times, what vehicles spawn where on what maps, how fast do ammo crates refill, what kinds of projectiles, how far away can you fucking revive somebody with the defibs. It's about more than just content, it's about how the rules shape that content and who the rules cater to. Games feedback is a very democratic thing. It's looking like there might be a sizable influx of Call of Duty players into the Battlefield franchise this year. That could dramatically change the trajectory of this title. Because I would bet they have some very different preferences than most traditional Battlefield players. They're going to want an easier game, and not all the time, but most of the time an easier game means a less fun game. As a brief example, they recently updated Battlefield 4 so the players are no longer allowed to wield any rocket launcher in vehicle passenger seats except for the RPG. Now granted, Stingers and Little Birds, Javelins and attack boats, that shit was overpowered, but those were the only two instances where launchers were unbalanced in passenger seats. Now, we can't even use Stingers on the back of a motorcycle, but it's like riding around in the motorcycle with your friend, hunting down enemy aircraft and like chasing them as they shoot back at you, and they're running behind mountains and you're hitting jumps and trying to lock on with your Stinger. That shit was awesome. You know, using a rib boat and strafing beachheads while your guy gets javelins off on the AA so your transport heli can move in, and then the transport heli has guys with SRAs, right? The wire-guided ones where the missile follows where you're aiming, and they're shooting at the buildings or something. I don't know. You know, that shit was so fun though. Launchers and passenger seats was like this perfect little microcosm of everything I loved about this game. Teamwork, sandbox, skill gap. And it got cut in the name of skill gap compression. Right, and this took place after the game had been out for like 2 years, and it's not a huge deal, but you add up a whole bunch of little stuff like that, and it begins to amount to significant changes in the game. And so going forward, the question is, what gets cut in Battlefield 1, how often, and what are the consequences of those cuts? Star Wars Battlefront is a Battlefield game that had all of the depth cut out, basically. It's a Battlefield game where they cut out class customization, or at least meaningful amounts of class customization. They cut out teamwork, they cut out sandbox, they cut out most vehicular play. And the question is, do we want that to happen to Battlefield 1? Because it can, and it will. It might have already happened. And it's bigger than just Battlefield 1. This is about the future of the franchise as a whole. We need to avoid another Battlefield Hardline down the road, which was another Battlefield game that just cut out all the depth. And that's why over the next 6 months, and for the duration of this franchise's existence thereafter, you should participate in online discussions at 2 a.m. in your underwear, on Reddit and on YouTube. And you gotta be specific about what's good and what's bad. They're gonna do a multiplayer reveal. Don't be one of these guys who says, it looks like this other game and I don't like that. Don't be that guy. You gotta say, hey, you know, TTK looks too low. Hey, it doesn't look like teamwork is rewarded enough. Hey, this one gun looks like a fucking dildo. You gotta be specific, and you gotta be realistic about what's doable, and be mindful of potential unintended consequences that might arise should the developers do what you're asking them to do. Really think through what it is you're asking for, because that is something that I think the gaming community at large has failed to do in a number of high-profile instances, including Star Wars Battlefront and Advanced Warfare. And remember that just because something's hard doesn't mean it's unfair. Just because it requires teamwork to do something doesn't mean it's broken. Be open to others' points of view, consider that other people love things you hate, and don't give in to this pathetic feedback loop that Call of Duty has spawned, where you complain about anything and everything that makes the game harder. Do not pray for an easier game. Pray to be a stronger player. The For the Win query of the day is, what do you think of Battlefield 1 based on what you've seen of it so far? Thanks for watching. Please remember to rate. This is Batman, signing out.
Let me catch you up.发射中。